Holy light of Levi, precious treasure thou art mine. Let my feet enter thy true highway, to guide me safely home.
And so we begin our investigation into timeless treasures that we find in our Bibles in 2 Peter chapter 1. Why do we even call this 2 Peter? Well, in the 3rd chapter of this book, Peter begins by saying, "This second epistle, beloved, I now write unto you." So it's the second letter that Peter wrote to Christians who were living in the 1st century. The word Christian is not in this book, but it's clear that those who received this letter, they were Christians. For instance, we learn in chapter 1 and verse number 1 that they were people of like precious faith. We learn in chapter 1 and verse 9 that their sins had been cleansed. There's no doubt that these people were Christians. Well, if you and I just want to take a look at the entire message of 2 Peter and get a feel for what this book is about, what would we say? Well, it's divided into 3 chapters, and it's pretty easy to see some of the main thoughts that are in each segment of this letter. For example, our study in chapter 1 is going to focus on personal spiritual growth. Chapter 2's main theme is the danger of false teachers. And then in chapter 3, the day of the Lord, which is pictured as being the end of this planet. Now, as you and I study the book of 2 Peter, we need to be on the lookout for some different things. For instance, throughout the book of 2 Peter, you will find reminders. In fact, if we had to put our finger on the purpose of this letter, one of the purposes is it's written to remind the Christians. You learn that in chapter 3 and verse 1. And in chapter 1, verses 12 and 13, we read that Peter says, look, as long as I still am alive, I'm going to keep reminding you, so that after I leave this world, you can remember these things. And so the book of 2 Peter, be looking for, number 1, reminders. A second thing to be looking for is encouragement. You'll find the word or the exhortation, be diligent. That is, put in your best effort. That's encouragement. You'll find the exhortation to grow. That's encouragement. So be watching for reminders, be watching for encouragement, and at the same time, be on the lookout for some warnings. We've already mentioned chapter 2. It's about the dangers of false teachers and how they can influence the thinking and the behavior of Christians. That's a warning. In chapter 3 and verse 17, there's the warning to beware lest they fall from their own steadfastness. So, reminders, encouragement, and warning. Chapter 1, or the entire epistle, it begins with an appeal to grow. Some of the more familiar words probably are chapter 1 and verse number 5. And beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, And the idea is add to virtue knowledge and add. What are you talking about? We're talking about growing. We're talking about making progress or improvement. So it begins by an appeal to grow. And the very last verse of the whole letter, chapter 3 and verse 18, but grow in grace and in the knowledge. It's an appeal to grow. Now that's where we're headed as we consider timeless treasures in chapter 1. Next up, in our next segment, we're going to talk about power, life, godliness, and knowledge. That's going to be a great study.
Let